Hey, what up, fam? It's your boy Norm, and I would like to welcome you to episode 56 of the Evangelical Norm. Um, I was going to take this week and talk a little bit about the Revoice conference that's coming up, um, but I decided that I want to wait until next week after it's over, can kind of watch and see if there's anything online, anything that's going to come of it, anything worthwhile talking about. I mean, Cross Politic has talked about it, Sheologians has talked about it, a couple other podcasts have addressed the Revoice conference coming up. So I'm going to wait and kind of tackle that next week after it's over, and I can watch a little bit of it, see what pops up online and so on. And also, I'm about a quarter of the way through Vicky Beeching's book. And I want to do a full review of that. And along with that, coming up in September after Jackie Hill Perry releases her book, which I've pre-ordered already, I'm going to take the two and I'm going to do a review of Jackie's book on its own, and then I'm going to do a comparative look at the both of them, because again, we've got two very similar situations of women with same-sex attraction. One who has now come out and is advocating for LGBTQ inclusiveness in the church as a lifestyle. And then you've got one who has repented and turned from her sin and is trusting in God to guide her in that. So that's going to be coming up further down the road. But next week we'll talk about Revoice and Vicky Beeching's book. Hopefully I can finish it this week. It's rough reading. It's really hard to read. So this week, what I'm going to talk about, we've got coming up this Thursday night, and this is probably why this video popped up in my feed, because I shared the event we've got coming up at Refuge Church this Thursday. We're going to do a worldview night where we're going to have a couple of elders up on a panel and an open mic for people to come in and ask their questions. So I don't think we're going to constrain all the questions to a morality worldview, but we're going to let people ask whatever questions they want, and we'll answer them as we can. But the initial topic to get the ball rolling is going to be morality and whether or not you need God to hate Hitler. So shared that. That's coming up, and I shared that video that Pastor Brian made, and the event coming up, and then this video pops up in my news or my Facebook feed. So I figure, it's because I'm typing the word atheist, skeptics, whatever, and so of course Facebook figures I want to see videos about skeptics or whatever. But this was actually pretty interesting, and so I want to react to it. So without further ado, I'm going to play it. I'm going to stop it at points, and we're just going to talk about it. So I was just going to let it play all the way through and then back it up. And so that's what we'll do. I'll let it play, and then we'll back it up and talk about bits and pieces.
It's the only reason you are virtuous, because that's your ticket to heaven. It's the only reason you don't beat your children to death because you don't want to go to hell. It seems to me that it's insulting to human beings to imply that only a system of rewards and punishments can keep you a decent human being. Isn't it conceivable a person wants to be a decent human being because that way he feels better, because that way the world is better? I would like to think, I don't believe that I'm ever going to heaven or hell. I think that when I die, there will be nothingness. That's what I firmly believe. That does not mean that I have the impulse to go out and rob and steal and rape and everything else because I don't fear punishment. For one thing, I fear worldly punishment. And for a second thing, I fear the punishment of my own conscience. I have a conscience. It doesn't depend on religion. And I think it's so with other people too. Besides, even in societies in which religion is very powerful, there's no shortage of crime and sin and misery and terrible things happening despite heaven and hell. I mean, I imagine if you go down death row, a bunch of murderers maybe who are waiting for execution, ask them if they believe in God. They'll tell you.
Okay, so there you have his take on things, his attitude about conscience and ability to be moral. So, a couple of key things that stuck out to me that I'm going to talk about, and we'll play through, and then we'll talk about it, and then we'll discuss it a little more when it's done. So,
It's the only reason. It's the only reason you are virtuous because that's your ticket to heaven. It's the only reason you don't beat your children to death because you don't want to go to hell.
okay. So here's the first thing. Let me not get stuck behind his face. Um, so no, the reason we're virtuous is not that that's our ticket to heaven, because that is not our ticket to heaven. As Christians, we understand and we believe that we are not virtuous in any way. We are all by nature sinners. We are all sinful by nature. We are all deserving of God's wrath. It is not our own virtue at all. So first things first, we have this man's uh, ignorance of or misunderstanding of what Christianity even is. Um, he doesn't understand the gospel. He doesn't understand the sin nature and the need for a savior and the fact that we are not saved by our works. Now, do I not beat my children to death because I fear hell? Well, yes. Um, Basically, because I understand. Because again, without heaven and hell, without um, an objective moral lawgiver, without anybody how can he tell somebody it's wrong to beat their children to death? I mean, maybe this person, maybe their child is psychopathic and has tried to murder someone else in the family. Now, and we're coming at this again. We're gonna take objective morality out of this. We're gonna take God out of this. We're gonna take heaven and hell. We're gonna look at this strictly from a worldly, survival of the fittest, secular humanist worldview. If I have a child and say my child has shown an absolute sociopathic attitude, psychopathic tendencies, homicidal, has murdered pets, other children in the family, would it not be prudent, even in a secular worldview, to put this child to death? If he's already shown a proclivity for murderous activity, for homicidal activity, if he's tried to murder me, would it not be prudent in a humanistic sense to protect myself from this child? So, taking away God, taking away objective morality, who is he to tell me that it is wrong to beat my children to death? Now we have a objective moral standard in God who says that it is wrong to, we go back to the law of Israel, and rebellious teenagers were stoned to death. This was a punishment. This was according to the law. Now, as Christians, we are no longer part of that. We are no longer bound by that part of the law. The persecution, the punishment, I'm wearing the shirt right now, the punishment that brought us peace was upon Christ. So now we no longer become judge and executioner. Now we still have worldly laws and punishment that he's going to get to in a minute. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it's not being virtuous that gains us our ticket to heaven. He's not understanding the gospel. here. And so it's not that that's my ticket to heaven is that is what makes me good or virtuous. It is the fact that I understand my sin and I'm saved by a good Savior, then I'm saved to do good works. And that is what motivates me to good works. But we see, and he even talked about it in the video, and I'm going to play it here again and I'm going to react a little bit more. But he already talks about the fact of, I mean, and he says in societies where religion is powerful. Well, I mean, religion is powerful all over the world. I don't know that there's any by nature or majority atheistic societies. So every society has a core of religion there somewhere. And yeah, we have crime because, again, it is not necessarily um, religion that makes us good. It is understanding the nature and person of God and the moral lawgiver that we understand what is right and wrong. And then we work from that viewpoint. So, continuing on.
It seems to me that it's insulting to human beings to imply that only a system of rewards and punishments can keep you a decent human being.
Okay, but we do need a system of reward and punishment to keep people as decent human beings because we see by human nature that without laws, without punishment, that chaos ensues. Without a laws to say don't steal from your neighbor, don't do these things. Again, when we come to an atheistic worldview, when we come to a humanistic attitude and survival of the fittest, it makes sense for me to get all I can. I should be taking food from my neighbors. I should be taking what is theirs and making it mine because of the survival of the fittest attitude. And so we require a set of a balance of reward and punishment to keep people moral, even outside of religion, even within just a secular worldview. And he even addresses that here, and he contradicts himself later.
Isn't it conceivable a person wants to be a decent human being because that way he feels better, because that way the world is better? I would like to think, I don't believe that I'm ever going to heaven or hell. I think that when I die, there will be nothingness. That's what I firmly believe. That does not mean that I have the impulse to go out and rob and steal and rape and everything else because I don't fear punishment.
Okay? So, is it not conceivable that a person wants to just be a good person because of the desire to be a good person? Because it makes them feel better. But here's the thing: in reality, in most places, it is actually it's the sin that makes them feel better. It is the sin nature, the ability to go out and just do whatever they want, that is actually what makes them feel better. Um, it makes the world a better place. I mean, again, we don't see that naturally played out in humanity. We don't see that. We look at humans left to their own devices, and over throughout history, we've seen that they will always resort to what Christianity, what the Bible refers to, what God refers to as sin, as opposed to doing those things. And yeah, I mean, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. Sometimes people do good things. There are crack dealers who will give to charity. You know, you see people like Cecile Richards, who ran Planned Parenthood, the world's biggest abortion mill, um, calling for humanitarian efforts to keep families together at the border during this immigration crisis that is going on. It makes, you have one thing where it looks like a call for humanitarianism, but yet on the backside, she's profiting and making however many millions of dollars or whatever she made over the years she was the president of Planned Parenthood, murdering children. So, again, humanity is by nature going to fall into sin as opposed to being moral. And that's just human nature, and that's proven over and over and over again.
For one thing, I fear worldly punishment.
And there he hits it again. He has now come to the point that I do fear worldly punishment. So again, he's absolutely contradicted himself in the fact that, well, I could just be a good person and people, but I fear worldly punishment, because we need to have worldly punishment in order to keep people from becoming absolute criminals and just letting chaos ensue.
And for a second thing, I fear the punishment of my own conscience.
And here's the other thing: we realize that there are people out there who do not fear their own conscience. Maybe he does. Maybe his conscience isn't seared to the point yet, and on certain issues it probably is. But we know that we have people who are sociopaths and psychopaths and kleptomaniacs and all these things that their conscience, they don't fear their conscience anymore. They don't fear the punishment of their own conscience because they've seared it to a point because they want to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. And so here where he's talking about fearing his conscience, okay, maybe, but there's far more people out there that have no fear of their conscience and are just going to do whatever it is that they feel they need to do.
I have a conscience. It doesn't depend on religion.
Where does your conscience come from, though? Because again, conscience is not something that falls in line with an atheistic worldview. It just doesn't. To have something that says you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. Well, according to atheism and uh, an evolutionary construct and survival of the fittest, I should be able to do whatever it is I want to or feel I need to for my own insurance of my own survival. And who is this guy to tell me that it's wrong when I'm just doing what needs to be done? That's the evolutionary worldview. That is the atheistic, humanistic worldview. That is the survival of the fittest worldview. I should be able to do whatever it is I need to do to ensure my own survival, conscience or not, whether it affects him or not. It's all about number one in that setting. And so conscience is not something that falls in line with an atheistic framework. Conscience only comes from God. It only comes from the objective lawgiver, to where we can find this until we sear it to the point that it's no longer functioning. But we initially have. It's why it's worldwide that when you steal something, your heart begins to pound and your palms begin to sweat. The first time you do it, I remember as a kid, the first time I shoplifted, and all the things that went on in my body, the physical manifestations of my conscience in my body. I knew what I was doing was wrong, even though I was trying to push past it, because I know that there's an objective law given by an objective lawgiver of what is right and what is wrong. But over time, had I not gone the way that I did and God not drawn me to himself, I probably would have continued on and potentially have seared my conscience to the point where it wouldn't bother me at all to steal. And we see that in people today.
And I think it's so with other people too. Besides, even in societies in which religion is very powerful, there's no shortage of crime and sin and misery and terrible things happening.
Okay, and here, this is what I talked about a minute ago. Well, all societies, religion is very strong. No matter where you go, you're going to have some kind of religion that is there. And for the most part, most of those religions do fall into the idea of what he commented of: if we are good enough to please the God of those religions, then we can achieve the salvation that we need or whatever that they promise. Whereas in Christianity is the gospel is the only place that we can go where we can understand that it's not by our own virtue. We don't earn our way there. We don't gain it on our own works. But Jesus gave it to us by his works and his righteousness. He's the only one that lived perfectly enough to pay the penalty for my sin and to give me his righteousness. So here in this situation, and we're gonna be finished up with this now. I'm done talking about him and reacting to what he's saying. But we're going to look at, in reality, the fact that it is only in the knowledge of God and an objective moral law presented to us by an objective moral law giver that we can have a standard, because we are seeing it in our society today. We've already legalized the murder of children, where objectively we know, and people who are going and having abortions and so on anymore, it used to be that they were using terminology, and some still do. They try to use a word like fetus or tissue or all these things to alleviate the fact that it's a human being that they're murdering. The same way that back in the days of slavery, I mean, they took away the personhood of the slave and made them property. And even the Supreme Court, they made it legal. And so again, here when we talk about conscience, we have, okay, maybe his conscience does tell him that something is wrong, but when someone else comes along and their conscience says it's not wrong, if I want to come up and start going through some strange woman's purse and just taking things out because my conscience doesn't think it's wrong, hers might. Well, now how do we come to an agreement on this? Well, we fall back on without, and if we take God out of the picture, we remove God. Again, we're going to come to this secularly, and we're going to try to discuss this on a worldly basis alone. She says it's wrong. I say it's not wrong. Well, so now where do we fall back on? We fall back on societal laws, governmental laws, what society says. Well, society is continually changing. I mean, society said slavery was legal. Society in Europe at that time, in Germany, everything Hitler did was legal. So if we can't come together on conscience, and we have differences in conscience, and we can't fall back on law because laws can be changed, and we've seen how they beneficially, I mean, providentially, these laws have majority changed for the better, but we're seeing laws that are changing for the worse. We've seen the legalization of the murder of children in the womb. We've seen the legalization of same-sex marriage, which is not marriage, but we've seen this. We're seeing now that people are doing TED Talks trying to convince us that pedophilia is just another in a long line of natural sexual orientations that cannot be changed and should not be attempted to be changed. And soon it's going to come to the point where they're going to try to justify that and say that we should let grown men sleep with young boys, because we have organizations like NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, which is just, it physically sickens me to even say the term. But we're seeing that happen, and we're seeing that laws will change, and it's happened throughout history. And so without an objective lawgiver, if we try to take God out of it, there's no way we can say what is right and what is wrong, because as long as we can manipulate society to make what we want to be right, then who's to say we can't legalize murder? We can't. Well, we've legalized it in abortion. Who's to say that somebody can't come along? I mean, they talk about they're so fearful of the rape culture in America and so on. Why? Who's to say they can't just legalize rape or legalize pedophilia or any of these things that are coming along that are in the works? It's literally there. I mean, literally, men have written papers and submitted them to medical journals trying to justify murdering children at up to the age of 2. This is reality. This is humanity. And without an objective moral lawgiver, without recognizing God, who says these things are absolutely wrong no matter what society says, we're lost because we have no way of stopping that. We have no way of stopping the human condition and making any kind of absolute moral standard. Because as long as society is willing to change, and as long as people are willing to try, then without an objective moral lawgiver, we lose everything that we stand on. So again, bringing that back to the gospel, and again, we understand that it's not by our works. And I want you. This is what I want you to hear every single week. It is not by being good. It is not by being moral. It is not by having moral standards that anyone gets to heaven, because we're not. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. You know, Isaiah hit, we have this in Isaiah. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter and sweet for sweet and sweet for bitter. So again, we're seeing this happen now, and we understand that this is what happens unchecked for human nature if there is no recognition of a moral lawgiver. And understanding that there is a moral lawgiver brings us back to the place where we understand that the things that we have done that are sin, whether it's lying, whether it's stealing, whether it's adultery, whether it's covetousness, whether it's murderousness, whether physical or in thought, blasphemy, all these things that God calls sin, that we recognize that we have done and we need to repent for. And we need to put our faith and our trust in the saving work of Christ, who paid the penalty for those sins on the cross, who went to his death so that we can be given life. And it is in that knowledge, and then we are saved to do good works. It is then that we start doing these things, not to earn our way to heaven, but out of the knowledge of what God wants us to do and out of gratitude for what has been done. So there's that. I've got to finish this up. It's getting very late, and I've got to go to bed, and I want to get this published and put out for you guys. So again, if you're in Utah, if you're anywhere where you can drive however far it is to come up to Ogden, to come up to Refuge Church in Ogden, Utah, come up and take a look. Bring some questions if you have any questions. The address is, let me scroll down to the bottom here, give you our address. Pastor Brian's blog. 607 26th Street in Ogden, Utah. Come join us. Ask questions if you have questions. Interact with us. Come feel welcome inside of a church where it's not preaching at you, but just answering the questions that you may have. I don't know how many skeptics, atheists, or anything are going to see this video that might take me up on that invitation, but give it a shot. Come see. If you're in the area, we'll probably record it and put it up on the website. You can watch it later. Potentially may be doing part of it on Facebook Live or YouTube Live. So we'll just see. But come and ask your questions. And hopefully, again, and I guarantee that this is one thing that you will hear the gospel. Again, as I've just presented it, as it is presented all the time at Refuge, you'll hear the gospel presented. So come, join us. If you like the video, subscribe, share, and if you want to, comment below. I'm always open to comments. I will delete it if it's full of foul language. So atheists, I know you like to swear at me and swear at Christians If you use foul language, zero tolerance. It'll be deleted immediately. But I'm open to answering any question that is posed to me in my comments. You know, to quote Steven Crowder, change my mind. If you think you can, here you go. This is what I believe. If you think you can, try to change my mind. For the rest of you Christians that are out there, that are watching, that are listening, remember, preach the gospel at all times. Use words. They're necessary. And until next week, Soli Deo Gloria.